All right, back with you again here. Chapter 8 of Lower the Trap, the Lobster Chronicles. So here's Dead Ahead. Quite an interesting little, looks like a buoy or the one, actually, it's a lamp. Lamp made of, down below there, those are the little cork round things put on a lobster trap or lobster netting to keep it afloat. And then after a while, once it gets waterlogged, it'll sink. But if they're dry, they'll float for a little while. You can see they look like donuts, but they'll actually float for a little while. Here we go. As I said, Lobster Chronicles, Chapter 8, Lower the Trap. It was feeding time once again, and Graham dropped greasy bait into the community museum's tank. The mega lobster was doing very well, gobbling up everything that came in its way. Flashing cameras did not disturb meal times one bit. By now, the crustacean was used to all the attention. Interesting stories, said a teacher who was accompanying a grade 4 field trip class from Maud Clifford, who flew all the way out from Alberta to Nova Scotia, from a nearby school. No, that's not right. Sorry, I'll repeat that. And another nearby school. Sorry, who was also there that day. He had finished reading the McDermott article, which Mrs. Kerrigan had. Moving right along. Posted near the tank. Whatever happened to that lobster? Graham froze, his hand loaded with bait and suspended over the saltwater tank. The lobster's antennae twitched madly. It doesn't say, Graham replied while struggling to stay calm. It was all he could do not to stretch the article, snatch the article off the wall and crumple it into a tight ball. But we wouldn't do that. That's not very nice. What was Ms. Carrington's thinking, posting it there for all of us to read? The grade 4s from Maud Clifford waited for Graham to speculate. Graham did not oblige. Looks like McDermott's lobster was left-handed, observed the same teacher, cutting into the awkward silence. Like yours, he added, turning to further study the article's photograph. Graham's thoughts flew into 1,000 different directions. He stood with his mouth open, unable to speak. The bait fell from his hand and plopped into the tank. Gobble, gobble, gobble. It sounds like a chicken, but it's actually a lobster. The class clapped their hands in delight, looking to Graham for more. But Graham needed a break from the spotlight. After quickly sealing the ice cream bucket, he pushed past the group and wandered over to the old cannery equipment display area where it was quiet, which was much quieter. He had seen the part of the museum many times before, but today something on the wall caught his attention. He moved closer. It was an oval plaque with a rope wrapped around the outside to serve as a frame. The plaque featured an arrangement of market-sized lobster claws held fast by plaster of Paris, each were slightly different from the next. The plaque had probably been crafted by a cannery worker, thought Graham. She must have came across lobsters with especially interesting especially interesting claws and collected those claws over time, much like the conversation that Graham collected in his journal. Graham stood in awe. Here was something else. Here was someone else who found time for scientific study, even while working on a busy cannery processing line. Curious about who had given this plaque to the museum, Graham read the small label at the side of the frame. Donated by the family of Audrey and Lawrence McDermott. Graham read out loud. Lawrence McDermott of the giant lobster fame, Graham deducted, and Audrey must have been McDermott's wife. That thought did not have much time to sink in because right at the moment there was a commotion at the museum's front door. "We're here," shouted one old man to another as they entered the museum. "What?" the other man asked. Ferguson, who accompanied the two, led the elderly men inside. Graham's heart began to pound in his ears. It was the men from Sunset Manor, Fogburner and the Crack of Dawn. And those are the skippers. They would be the skippers of the Fogburner and the Crack of Dawn. "Hey, Graham," Ferguson called out with his delight. "My granddad and Mr. Hastings are here to see your giant lobster." "Great," said Graham weakly, his feet cemented to the floor. "There it is, dead ahead," said Ferguson, pointing to the tank. "What?" asked Crack of Dawn, adjusting his hearing aid. Ferguson led the two men over to the mega lobster. The grade 4 class split up to let the seniors through. What a nice group of kids those grade 4Bs are. Graham observed from afar as the scene played out in what seemed to be a slow motion. Then he watched in agony when he saw Ferguson's grandfather spot McDermott's article on the wall and say something to the crowd. "What?" asked Crack of Dawn. "Hey, Graham, come on over here," Ferguson called. "My granddad wants to tell you something." "Sure thing," Graham called back, trying desperately to sound casual. It was all he could do to make his legs move, one step at a time, and all he could think about was how Ferguson's grandfather would claim that this lobster was McDermott's lobster, how town would be rallying behind the idea of letting the lobster go free, and how there would be no bidding or no big fish aquarium. "Your lobster's in awful good shape," remarked Fogburner when Graham was within earshot. "What?" asked Crack of Dawn. "Thanks," said Graham, shrinking from all of the eager eyes in the crowd. "I was on the wharf when McDermott caught his lobster," said Fogburner, pointing his gnarly finger at the posted article. By then, Mrs. Carrington had joined the group. She spoke. I was wondering, McDermott never donated a mounted giant lobster to the museum. Do you know if he had set it free? The class fell silent, pondering the possibility. In the distance, a foghorn sounded. Graham felt like he had been washed out to sea. No, he didn't, said Fogburner. Matter of fact. Graham's jaws dropped. What happened to it? Asked Mrs. Carrington. McDermott's lobster died, explained Fogburner. Something about the change in water temperature or the salt level in the brine. I can't quite recall. It died? Repeated Graham, finding his voice at last and grabbing onto the life vest of information. Why would this be a life vest? Well, it is a life vest because this kind of gets rid of the option of putting the lobster back in the water. But his relief was short-lived because the next word spoken swallowed Graham whole. Oh, wow, the turn of events. It was McDermott's biggest regret. Fogburner continued. McDermott told us that something surviving that long shouldn't have been returned. Sorry, let me rewind that one, okay? McDermott told us that something surviving that long should have been returned to the sea. The heads in the crowd started to nod, one by one. What? Asked Crackadawn. And that's chapter 8, kids. Once again, we're out here in the main room with Bernie and Ernie and Bert, and they're going to say goodbye to you for a bit. And then we'll go in to see where we can find the blue lobster. All right, so we'll move on to chapter 9. So see you later. Here we go. Bye for now.